Welcome to the Dealmaker Show, the #1 place for entrepreneurs and dealmakers to learn about leveraging and generating status, frame control, and narrative power to close big deals. Here is your host, investment banker, deal-making expert, and best-selling author of Pitch Anything and Flip the Script, Mr. Oren Klaff.
Welcome back. This is Oren Klaff with the Dealmaker podcast. I'm here with Greg McKee of Tryp, Therapeutics. Greg, thank you for driving on over. You're one of the few guys who's close to us, so came here.
Glad to be here, Oren. Thanks for giving me an excuse to get out of the house a little bit.
So we're here in the studio, and we've been interviewing many times cannabis guys, and cannabis is interesting because it generates a lot of excitement. You take your barbecue company, you take your keyboard manufacturing company, you take your coffee company, and then you add the word cannabis to it, and now you have an exciting public company. So not since the .com were you able to just add a word to the end of whatever it is you do,
right?
Dog walking, cannabis, and then have an exciting company. But now, and so as you and I were talking, the company you're running is Tryp Therapeutics, is in psychedelics. And so I said, okay. And we talked about it. Is it cannabis part 2?
Right. Yeah. So interesting thought process, right? So some of our investors are kind of viewing the marketplace as, yeah, maybe this is cannabis 2.0. And I think that part of the reason they're thinking that is that many of them did incredibly well, right? They just made absolute fortunes in the market. A lot of them are up in Canada. We happen to be publicly traded up there, which is fantastic, by the way, right? But this, I think, could be a lot different. So rather than sort of having recreational uses, rather than focusing on growing, and some people are going to grow shrooms, right? Some people are going to harvest and extract and things like that. A lot of us are in the industry are very focused on synthetic generation of this chemistry, and then working on kind of real traditional biotech / pharmaceutical drug development. So it's got a little bit of both elements to it.
Okay, well, so much to unpack there. Let's talk about psychedelics.
Yes, okay.
Where did this even come from? Why is this an idea?
Right.
Walk us all through it, because now we're hearing it. People are very excited about it. You can add it to the end of your, again, we've got a barbecue grill company and psychedelics. Now it's exciting. But, what strikes me is, you and your founder, 23-year-olds, nothing wrong with 23-year-olds other than their 23-ness. But, you're senior pharmaceutical industry guys with experience in real companies, public companies, real deals, and you can choose anything to do, right? And then this attracted your attention. What is it in psychedelics that has pulled you in and said, A, this is something, B, it's something real, C, we can help people, D, we can have an exciting company. How did you get there?
Right. So, it's really simple, right? That there's a lot of naturally derived chemistries around that eventually find their way into kind of more traditional drug development pathways. And psychedelics is one of those, right? These chemistries have been around since the 60s and 70s. They've been tested recreationally by a lot of different people. We know that they work. We know that they're well tolerated. And since then, a whole bunch of very well-known academics at like NYU, Johns Hopkins, Yale University, and others have been studying these things for the last 30, 40 years.
So is there somewhere that we would be familiar, that they've made it into a mainstream molecule that has gone traditional drug development and made it?
Not yet, which is actually the opportunity, right? So nobody's done that yet. We're just actually making it synthetically again and making it up to pharmaceutical grade standards. And it's just getting back into traditional clinical studies, right? So there's one study at the moment that one of the leading players in the space, Compass Pathways, is just finishing recruitment on probably next week with about 230 patients. That will be the largest double-blind placebo-controlled study ever done in this type of chemistry. But there's many other companies that are going to be doing similar types of studies in the future, including in other therapeutic areas besides what Compass is working on.
So where is the, what's the big idea from your standpoint? Like, hey, if we could solve X with our therapeutics, then we would be doing the Lord's work to extend people's lives that would otherwise be sacrificed. Right. Yeah, this is not about having a better drum circle.
Exactly, right?
Yes.
So this is the whole point. So the way that I first got introduced to these chemistries, these molecules, were from some good friends of mine, a number of former Navy SEALs who are here locally in Southern California, all of whom came back from the battlefield with PTSD and depression and other sort of mental disorders, right? And almost every single one of them to a T swore by using one specific chemistry, 5-MeO-DMT, which is a certain psychedelic. But of course, they had to use it sort of in the back streets, up in Berkeley, down in Mexico. It wasn't, FDA approved.
Or next door. We have SEAL Fit. We have Mark Divine.
All right. Next door, right?
Yeah.
So they may have been coming next door, right? Since it's right here in Carlsbad. But those guys all swore by it, right? And they said it completely changed their lives. So we, at Tryp, we're not focused on depression. We're focused on pain. But the thing that we're most excited about is that people like Dan Klaff, who's a hotshot professor at University of Michigan, who's gotten all the drugs approved and worked on all the drugs that have been approved for fibromyalgia, thinks all those drugs suck. I mean, they just don't work, right? So those patients with fibromyalgia don't have anything else to go to right now. And he believes that this particular pain that they deal with is all mental. And if we can bring these chemistries to market through an FDA pathway, then we think that we can completely change those patients' lives, among many, many other patients that suffer from chronic pain.
So my podcast strategy is to say funny things until I hear something I actually know something about, and then ask some tough questions.
All right, go do it.
Pain. So I was in a deal in which we were working on genetic markers and identifiers for pain medication in order to predict how you would genetically, what your genetic predisposition is to processing different kinds of pain medication. 238 opiates generally on the market. When you have pain, some kind of chronic pain condition, the goal of your pain doctor is to find some opiates that you don't habituate to too easily, don't leave you completely looped out when you're taking some amount of the medication, but also have some efficacy. So they start cycling you through medications to see what you can genetically manage within your system. And that's why there's so many opiates, so many different. So when you guys say pain, right, how is it better than opiates? And what range of pain is really realistic to look for alternative, medications other than the real hardcore opiates that are in the market?
It's such a great point, because that's the other benefit we think of bringing these drugs to market, is we think that we can get rid of the opioid crisis just for the very reason you said, right? At the moment, the tool in the toolkit is opioids, which most patients get addicted to, and they never are able to back away from those. So, but your question's well taken, right? So what types of pain? So the pain is very specific types of it's a whole body of different types of pain, but it's very specific. It's always pain that doesn't have something that a physician can go and medically address, right? So there's no addressable pain point, right? Secondly, they've tried every other type of therapy and nothing has worked, right? So a great example of this is phantom limb pain. So this is after patients had an amputation because of some traumatic injury. So there's no limb, right? There's no nerve endings. There's no potential for nerve damage because there's nothing there. Yet the patient still feels pain in that particular limb, right? So it's clearly all in the head.
Yeah.
It's inside the patient's
It's like
head,
a phantom girlfriend pain, but much more acute. Yes.
Right. Well, I'm not sure which would be more acute, but yes, right. Same concept, right? It's that kind of pain, right? That needs to be addressed with essentially a rewiring of the brain. The brain has got some misfirings going on that's sending these phantom pain signals into that phantom limb that needs to be readdressed. So we think the combination of a psychedelic coupled with psychotherapy to lay down some new tracks could rewire the brain such that the pain goes away.
So this is amazing. I'm really interested in this from a million different angles. We got to get into the finance of it. But I recently had a surgery and they gave me 18 oxycodone. You know, it's post-surgery, so they prescribe it. So I took one. Holy fucking shit. Like that stuff is amazing. So I still have 17 left, by the way, if you want them. They're $18 each. Yeah.
I'll take the whole lot.
I mean, just, you know, $18 is the same price as down by the high school. And so I was fortunate to be recovering fast enough to not have to be on it. But that stuff is, they said you have to be careful because you can get addicted on 3 pills. And I totally get it because it gives you, I don't take that stuff. And so I'm not habituated to it, but it gives you euphoria. So you wake up
for sure
in a total state of everything. I mean,
talk about life is good,
yeah,
right?
A lot of people are going, how do you not know this about drugs? That's why they're called drugs. Right. But for me, I was like, oh, whoa, this is, so you total state of euphoria. And so the physician said, because that was your reaction to them, you need to be especially careful about this stuff. I fortunately don't have a personality, that is addictive to anything, except for cars and, alcohol and coffee and, work.
A few of those good things, right?
But, not a really addictive personality. But they said, because of your personality and because of your response to it, you need to be super careful about this stuff. So how does this stuff circumnavigate the stuff you're working on, these really addictive brain profiles that you're just, grabbing, if you think about Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? So he, grabs an idol and replaces a sandbag.
Right.
But it didn't work in the movie either.
Right. No,
right? So
it did not work.
Is that what we're just, doing here, is taking away one opiate and replacing another?
Definitely not. So on a bunch of different levels, right? So first of all, the mechanism of action is totally different, but more importantly, it's kind of to your question, right? So we're not going to give people tablets. They're also not going to be going home with those drugs in hand with 17, 18 capsules that they can use for the next couple of weeks or sell on the street for whatever the price might be, right? So 2 things happen. First of all, most likely everyone's going to be taking this in a pretty controlled setting, meaning they're going to be going into a clinic or some sort of treatment center, and there'll be physicians or psychiatrists or psychologists there with them to monitor them, and they'll be only given drug that day for that particular overall experience. And so it's a combination of the drug plus the psychotherapy that's the overall treatment regimen, and there's no way they can walk out the door with drug in hand. First. Second of all, the mechanism of action is totally different and is non-addictive, we believe, at least based on the evidence right now. We'll see, but at this point, nothing seems to indicate that there'd be anything like what happens with opioids, for example.
And so that's amazing. Before I get in the business of it, then is this something, that you guys inside the company would try yourselves for any, is it so specific to pain, or because I heard you mention depression or PTSD and a range of things?
Right.
I'm trying to wrap my arms around.
Right. So it's not specific to pain. It's specific to a certain type of pain, but that common thread is some sort of misfiring of the brain signals, right? So it touches anxiety, it touches eating disorders, it touches depression, PTSD, pain, right? Anywhere where there's just these misfirings in the brain that need to be essentially opened up and rewired, right? So in our particular chemistry it's slightly different, but it's not so different that it's off target compared to the same drugs that are being used for depression, say, for example. So this isn't only for pain. It could be for a wide variety of different indications where the patient just sort of needs their brain rewired to function a little bit differently.
Yeah. Although, the makers of morphine could have the same argument. It's not just for pain. It's also for people who are sad, or bored, right? And they do, or, maybe insomnia.
Good point. Fair enough.
Right?
Yeah, fair enough.
But no, I hear what you're saying. So talk to me about the business of doing this. So how did you hear about this? How were you recruited into it? And what did you leave to say, this is better than anything else I could be doing?
Yeah. So I mean, the first part of my story was, as I mentioned, I had run into a number of former Navy SEALs could use similar chemistries, right? And just swore by it.
Yeah.
And then I started doing a little bit of research and realized how much history there is on these chemistries, how long they've been around, the safety profile that's pretty fantastic, and all this evidence that it actually works, plus additional academic work that's been done over the last couple of decades in this field to really begin to validate it. And then, as always in life, right, I bumped into a good friend of mine who I've known for a long time, who was the founder of Tryp, and he was looking to expand the board. He also needed some help on the management team. In fact, partly the name was the hook for me. When I heard it was Tryp Therapeutics, have a Tryp, tryptamine is, the chemistry we're working with. I mean, that pretty much sold me on the company. Yeah. But yes, I tripped over Bill's shoelace and here I am at the company. And
so then let's talk about a fairly young company. You're coming in, and so I think a lot of people are excited by the idea of, something leading edge, whether it's a therapeutic like this, whether it's a SaaS software for creators, whether it's an NFT, whether it's a data visualization, for B2B, whether it's AI, machine learning, like there's all this stuff on the leading edge of next generation business models. It's not fully proven out, but it's an exciting area. There's lots of money coming in. And so you come into this business where there is and I kind of think about it in terms of squirrel theory. There's a lot of people attracted to it because of the potential. But the further they get in the potential, the more nervous they get about, how is this really a business? What are the economics? What are the drivers? How do we raise capital for it? How much capital is needed? When is the demand going to show up? Will the FDA approvals come in? And will we turn this? So it's like a squirrel. They're attracted to it, and then they run away from it. And then they come a little closer to it, and then they run away from you. We've all seen these, squirrels in this back and forth cycle. And they either get run over or they make it to safety. But so talk me through that experience of, investors coming towards the company and being excited by it. What's it like being in such an exciting space in which there should be, hundreds of millions of dollars coming to the company? So what excites people and what turns them away?
Right. If I can say, it's unbelievably dull inside, right? It is, as the squirrels are jumping, running across the eight lane freeway to check out that nut that's on the other side, and then scared and running back. We're on the other side of the road, just whittling away every single day. It's just one little step in front of the other. But
that's amazing. Yeah.
What is like anything, right? And it's going to take a little bit of time to get there. But what's encouraging to me is several different things. One of them is that there is just so many people that have been working on this already for such a long period of time that completely see the value of this. And second of all, we know there's a very tried and true pathway to make money from this, as long as we help patients, right? And the probability, the chance that we're going to help patients with this chemistry is so unbelievably high. It's so different than almost any other brand new therapeutic target, brand new small molecule, brand new biologic that we hear about every single day in the biotech space, right? This stuff has been around for a long time. And we know that it's been used in a lot of patients, and we've seen the positive effects from it. So it's really all about the execution of validating what we pretty much know to be true, that these chemistries are safe and well tolerated and they're effective. And then taking all the steps we need to get FDA approval. Ultimately, right? So everybody in my team is, so one, there's all that outside validation from academics. And then everybody in the team are all deep drug development experts with 10, 20, 30 years of experience that we bring to the table.
So what happens when you get FDA approval to the company?
Well, there's a couple different things that'll happen. Ultimately, my vision is that we take this all the way through FDA approval and that we commercialize it on our own, or at least we're prepared to do that, right? It's very similar to a company right here, actually in Carlsbad, called GW Pharma, that sold to Jazz Pharmaceuticals. Justin Gover is a good friend of mine and CEO, and they did the exact same thing actually with a cannabis product for pediatric epilepsy. And they took it all the way through FDA approval and to market. Now, so what happens post-approval is we can begin to market it like any company, which I think we could, or along the way, we may decide to license the product to pharma. We may sell the company. we have lots of different choices. We'll have to just see, at that point.
So something interesting about you, I have a friend and he runs let's just call it a snowboard company. I can't be too specific because this is some negative information, but he runs a snowboard company, and he's running it. He's growing it it was stagnant. It's a household name brand. You would reckon anybody, under the age of 24 would recognize it immediately. Right. And so I was talking to him and I go, where do you snowboard? What winter sports do you do? He goes, I fucking hate snowboarding. Right.
Never get on one.
This is a household name brand that anybody would think like the founders are just eating and sleeping with their snowboards and 200 days a year on the slopes, and he's running it, the CEO of it, and he goes, yeah, I was brought in because I hate this stuff, right? Because this needs a business. So but you seem very passionate about the space, more so than you were just brought in to run the spreadsheet, do the patent filings, hire the technologists, fill out the org chart, make sure the funding is in place. You seem excited about it. What's it? How does this tie into purpose and values for you? What's lurking, below the surface? It's driving you in this way for this company.
Right. For me, there's so many different things that we can do, right? Like we were talking about before we got started today. And for me, I just always have to believe in ultimately the product, right? And when you can bring a product to market that can help patients in the way that now I see this product can help patients, you can't help but not work on this project. It's going to literally be life-changing for tens of millions of patients potentially. It's
so interesting as a psychology, because most of us, we have I have an online program. I have 5,000 companies in there, and most of them are working on products. And the thing about products is, here we're drinking these cans, and you taste it, and you go, okay, it's sparkling raspberry, and hey, we can improve the formula, put out another batch, have users taste it, and there's this sort of instant feedback, or even better, we have a SaaS software. We're using this thing called Descript, a great little program which lets you do a podcast or recording. It turns it into a Word file. You edit the Word file, and then the Word file edits the audio and video.
Oh, cool.
It's so cool. That thing is like no longer relevant, updating like in the App Store, but every 2 hours, it's like updating. You have to close, update, new features, update. They're like adding 2 features an hour, right? And so many businesses were getting to, like, I put out a video and I see how many likes there are, and I get that immediate feedback. The drink company, the SaaS software company, the editing software company, they have all this immediate, instantaneous feedback on the product and how good they're doing. And they get to leave the office every day either feeling great or feeling like they didn't hit their goals and they're not doing well, but at least they know where they are. What's it like is a very long question, by the way. Oh, but how do you, for people who are getting into a long cycle project who don't have that immediate feedback, what advice, of seeing the product in the hands of customers every day and getting customer level feedback? How do you stay in the game? How do you stay motivated? How do you stay up? How do you, stay on your Gantt chart without that feedback?
Yeah, it's a really good point, right? Especially in a project like a drug development, drug discovery type of project that can take years to actually get to that endpoint of FDA approval and commercialization, which is sort of the big goal, right? So part of it's 2 things. One of them is you have to keep looking for these earlier signals along the way, right? So interim data, preclinical data, phase 1 data, phase 2 data, 2A data, 2B data, phase 3 data, right? Things like that. Surrogate markers, which is a couple things that we're doing. We're looking at 2 different surrogate markers that we hope will be added to the industry. You also, look at what everybody else is sort of like, what's happening in the academic world, what data they showing up with. But I think also part of it is that, frankly, in this particular arena, I think one of the big things that could come of this is that we learn how to really shorten the cycles and figure out how to get through drug development a lot faster. Right now, those feedback loops, as you were describing, are just really slow. They're annoyingly slow. And eventually they're going to need to change. So I think that that's part of the big innovation that's going to take place overall in drug development, even outside of psychedelics. And I'm hopeful that maybe along the way we can figure out a way to improve that process.
So you've been, haven't been doing it for, years and years, but in the year plus you've been doing it, what's the biggest setback that you've had? Or have you not had enough time to have setbacks?
We've had a couple setbacks. It's not been that long yet.
Oh,
it's been about half a year, but
I know you guys in La Jolla, my coffee didn't come by 9,
I came at 9:15.
Yeah.
Well, so so a couple things. So, for me personally, for us, one, we rely on a lot of outside people, right? We're a pretty small company in terms of our actual employees. But if you look at the numbers of individuals, consultants, full-time consultants, part-time consultants, outside service providers, if you look at, and all the people in the academic institutions we work with, we've got 4 major academic partnerships in the works right now that have 10 to 20 people each, right? So there's probably a couple hundred people around this project right now. So we've got to rely on all those people to do their little part at the right time, right? In the best way possible. And every now and then those things don't quite happen. Certain people, certain organizations don't quite hit timelines that you'd expect, for one. The second thing is we have a bunch of highly creative scientists in our shop, and they do want to play squirrel, right? They want to go and chase the latest, greatest thing, and to keep everybody all in line is a big task. And that takes a lot of work and effort. And
so what kind of person should get into a project where it's going to be a couple of years without, where you're looking to, we found genetic marker AB7T, which is a proxy for L7, and now we can run 3,000 tests in this new, genetic exploratory area. And that's your accomplishment, right? So for people who are getting into these sort of long cycle, without real market revenue driven feedback, what kind of psychology do you need?
That's so part of it is that we're not that type of drug development company, right? There's all this history. We have this huge tailwind behind us, for one. But I think the other is that everything where you do incredibly well for human beings broadly or financially takes a while. It just doesn't happen, overnight. I think a lot of it is just looking at what's happening, what kind of information is the company kind of pushing out, what real significant little, milestones are they hitting along the way. And I think those are the things to track, right? Because we never know. A lot of the great stories out there right now have come right to the edge of going bankrupt multiple times, even when we all thought they were perfectly fine, right? I was just reviewing this great little recap of Tesla, for example. I mean, they almost went down for the 3rd time in 2017. That was only 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, right? And that's already when they had gone through Model X, Model S, right? And then those two new models. So, I mean, it takes some time, but I don't think that we've got so much of a tailwind, and we're pushing out, I think, some really good indicators of how we're doing. So I think those are the things to follow.
And when you think about you running the company and somebody else founding it, are those really separate mentalities, mindsets, and founders can't run companies, and CEOs don't want to take the early stage risk, or did it just happen? That's when you stumbled into the project.
Yeah, I don't really buy into such discrete absolutes, right? I think it all depends. Just depends on the personalities of the individual. The founder of this company has founded a few other companies, and he's fantastic at that, at the really early stage, conception, ideation, pulling together, kind of cobbling together the initial resources and team. And the other stuff, less of a strength of his. I'm not so great at that, but I like to get in early. I like to get involved deeply. So in this particular case, it was, kind of that kind of mix up, but I don't think you can sort of say that it's always one way or another. There's so many different pathways to success. And I think, for me anyway, I always am open to whatever that path may be. And it may be a path we haven't seen before.
Obviously, you're running the company as a public company. Whenever I have public company CEOs, they never swear. It's just now in the private guys,
seriously,
the private guys are swearing like
left and right,
and it just
like
could be
sailors.
coincidence. This isn't like a big sample, but generally the level of professionalism and sort of adopting very more strict business and cultural norms. I just see a little bit more, but extend
Fair
that
enough.
a little bit. What is it like running a public company versus a private company in your mind? Like what are the stark differences?
This is where I swear, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, stark differences. I mean, the number one, the biggest difference of a public company is that your cost of capital is in your face every single day, meaning your share price is on your screen and you're looking at it 20 times a day. That is the number one biggest difference. So exactly, you talk about an instant feedback loop in terms of what the street thinks of your performance and how the company's doing. That feedback loop is instantaneous. Whether you like it or not, or whether it's right or wrong, is something completely different. But that's one of the biggest differences for sure. Secondly, there is a lot of regulatory red tape you've got to go through as a public company. And there's just lots of I's to dot and T's to cross.
But just your accountant and your CPA, your law firm and your CPA and your CFO, aren't they doing 95% of that? I mean,
Sure.
not really
sure. I mean, that doesn't end up on the, in the CEO's desk every single time, but you're sort of aware of that, right? And you're involved because those people, as you describe, your CFO, your CPAs, your accountants, your tax folks, you're the legal team, right? They're bringing things to you pretty regularly to take care of. So it's not lost on you that you're in a highly regulated environment.
But on the other side, you're not going and raising, $5 or $8 or $20 million from one group of guys. Stan, who graduated from Stanford 3 years ago and raised a $200 million fund, and now you need $20 million from him, and he's sitting on the board and got his boot on your neck, to hit the numbers that you produced 2 years ago, during the financing. So you haven't taken one lump sum from a small number of people that you're married to. Somebody can come in the company, discover for whatever reason they don't love the way it's being managed, and they could leave and they're gone. And so isn't that the positive side of it, is like the money that you need, really you can raise as you're going along?
That's right. It's much less concentrated, right? So the power of the capital is less concentrated. It's managed through the board, of course, which has a lot of power in and of itself, no doubt, right? And is looking on behalf of and working on behalf of all shareholders. But you do have a much broader set of capital you can draw on, for sure. That's definitely a big plus.
Right. Would you prefer, to convince 50,000 people to give you $5,000, or, one guy to give you 20 million?
Right. Which one of those two challenges?
Yeah. Which
I've been involved in and on both sides of the equation, and both have positive attributes. But for the time being, I enjoy being in the public market space. I actually really enjoy talking to investors, updating investors on social media, having online sessions where I'm asking lots of different questions, fielding input from a wide variety of different people. One of the things that happens for sure in a public company, because you have so many different folks looking at you regularly, the ideas that get sort of lobbed on, that come to your desk, come to you through email or through text or through social media, is there's a wide variety of different suggestions on how to improve the company. And that particular aspect is very different. And you typically don't see that in a private company because, as you said, the capital is very narrowly sourced. And the people that are watching the company are maybe a couple handfuls of individuals plus everybody inside, versus potentially hundreds or thousands of investors who are watching a publicly traded company.
Yeah. So you enjoy that.
That part it's incredible, the ideas that come out of the woodwork, actually, when you're running a public company.
So what is the key, if you have any insight on it, to sort of getting one person who's coming in and says, I'm interested. And obviously you're not pitching one person at a time, but what is the key set of information or the key pitch or the narrative that gets, I think it's really interesting to people, get one person to believe in you to the tune of, $5,000 for lack of knowing what the number, but a small amount of money. Really, what tools do you have to trigger that belief system in you and the company? And I say you because you're running it. And it's, again, you're not trying to get a $20 million check, because we know what those tools are. Well, that is
right.
A financial model and an audit and, and a pitch and a board of advisors and a clear understanding of the competition, the historical metrics, pro forma projections based on, key industry metrics that have been achieved before, the science being defensible, having patents in place. Like, these are all the levers that you need to go in and get a true kind of institutional financing round. You don't need that for one guy or a family office to believe enough to take some stock, to make a bid.
Right.
What are the tools that bring those kind of people in, supporters, that you feel like you have today?
The two things, my two go-to, if I can say it that way, resources are: one, building trust with that individual and that person, trust in my team, myself, trust in my team, trust in our program. And second of all, actually not pitching, it's really educating that individual, just educating them in terms of what I see and letting them sort of come and stand in my shoes for whatever it is, half hour, however long the conversation is, and educate them on what I'm seeing, what I'm doing, and how I see this particular opportunity. And I find those two tools work the best out of anything that I've tried over the years. It's about walking them through how drug development works, right? How the FDA works, how these experiments work, who are the individuals that are involved, what type of endpoints we're looking at. It's taking what just naturally comes to us inside the company and what's in my head, and explain that in a fairly easy to understand or understandable way for someone who doesn't do this day in and day out, right? Because like any industry, right, if it's, you're rattling off names, a whole bunch, there's a lot of cool stuff happening in crypto and in AI and, space travel and electrification. I mean, every industry's got its really gnarly little ins and outs, right? And most of us on the outside can't really understand that. But if somebody who's inside, if the CEO of that company tells me what's happening inside in a way that doesn't make me feel stupid, that helps me understand, then I'm going to really, feel a lot more inclined to invest, as compared to if they throw a bunch of acronyms at me and a bunch of stuff that makes no sense.
Here's what I think you guys have, is that what you're doing is a known process. It's like a real estate deal, right? And there's not, like, crypto and NFTs, those aren't known processes. Those are just wild.
Those are wild new.
Even SaaS software, those are wild unknowns. How you're going to get traffic, what your conversion rates are, what value you're going to supply to customers, what the churn and attrition. Those are all the wild unknowns.
Good point.
And so I feel like in some ways it's a real estate deal or a basketball game. There's rules.
Right.
Yeah. There's referees. There's rules, and you're sort of convincing people, we know how to play by the rules. We play fair, we play hard, and this is our game plan, and this is why we think we put more points on the board.
It's a good point, right? Because there are definitely, there's a set path in terms of how drug development works, and it's not being completely made up as we go along like other industries. Not that those aren't interesting areas, right? I mean, crypto, NFTs, like you mentioned, are pretty cool areas at the moment and may end up being gigantic market someday. But we do know the basic steps. We think there's maybe some shortcuts. There might be some backdoor ways to make things a little more efficient. But there is sort of a known set of guidelines that we all follow.
Yeah. So you sell in something I call the buyer's formula. You're sort of teaching people how to buy your product and then giving them autonomy to judge you within that framework.
Right. We don't have to sell them on the framework so much because that's really out of our control. But we can pitch them on, we know what we're doing in that space.
Yeah.
And our particular chemistry and drugs that we're working on have a high chance of working.
It's my favorite kind of selling, which is this exists. This
Right.
is our view on it. If you agree with the way we look at it, and if you agree with our metrics, right, then it's just math that we're going to be successful. So we're not talking about our success. We're not talking about our capability. We're not talking about the market or the TAM or the SAM, or the demand curve. We're just talking about can we do the things we say we're going to do? Are those reasonable? And do you have certainty that we'll hit the milestones that we say we're going to hit? Because if you believe in those things, then you're in.
Right. Yeah. Good points for sure. Right. There is definitely a bit of a pathway that's been tried and trodden by many others ahead of us.
So we could, we could have you in here all day doing a masterclass on how to start, run, and sell and operate a therapeutics company. And we all have somebody, either ourselves, let's go back to talking about human beings. It's really fun to talk about the stock and the capital markets and the capital stack and running a company. But a company like this, there's actually humans involved. So if we know somebody or we have, with a chronic pain condition, or some of these other sort of PTSD conditions that you mentioned, if we have it ourselves, from the human side, is there anything we can do to support Tryp and and the company and get behind assisting and getting these therapeutics to market as fast, the approval and into doctors and then into patients' hands as fast as possible?
Yeah, it's interesting question, right? There's definitely a few ways, right? Part of it is like this whole space of psychedelics is going through a big regulatory kind of review from a legislative perspective right now, right? So just recently, the Senate in California voted to decriminalize psychedelics. These drugs now are called Schedule I compounds, which means that you can't use them without an exemption, right? Even for academic studies. So like on one level, if you believe that this chemistry should be out there and available for most of us, which I think it should be, then like literally just calling up your senator, calling up your congressman, and getting these drugs moved off a Schedule I and decriminalized would be a fantastic help to everybody in the industry. I mean, the other is if you are, if you know somebody or if you personally have one of these diseases, then participating in a clinical study would be another way to participate. And there's many companies that have trials that are up and running. They're all available at clinicaltrials.gov. You can look it up specifically, or I can give you a reference if that's helpful. So that would be something else that would be, like you would be right there in the thick of supporting the entire space by getting involved in a clinical study, which is, personally, I found doing that to be a really pretty exciting way to experience this industry. I mean, and then the last is, of course, you can support your local academic institution that's working in these. There's many different centers that are getting created in the psychedelic arena. UC San Diego, for example, is just starting a brand new psychedelic institute under Mark Geyer, which we're incredibly, excited about. And, others will probably, emerge. NYU's got a new center. Hopkins has got a big center. Yale's got a big center. But, the more that are kind of around, the better. We think that UCSF is also going to be pushing very assertively into this space. They've just recruited a fantastic researcher out of London, Robin Carhart-Harris, who just joined as of the 1st of July. So that's another way, as well.
That's awesome. Two quick more questions. One is, what should people who are super stimulated about the space try and avoid, right? So what are the things that you can easily identify as, scams or hoax science or over promising or over optimism, because I know the space is super heated.
Yeah.
What should people really feel like is, whatever the therapeutic molecule version of a pyramid scheme is?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's definitely hype in this space right now, right? In psychedelics broadly. My advice, right, would be to look at, the companies that you're involved with carefully in terms of where are they in terms of getting in the clinic, right? Where are they in terms of starting clinical studies and actually dosing patients, dosing human beings with their chemistry? That I think is a really high litmus test, because to get to that point means you had to check off so many different boxes of manufacturing material to a certain standard, getting through the FDA approval process, getting through institutional review board process, writing a protocol, writing informed consent, all these, just a pile of paperwork and other things to actually get to the point where you can dose your patient. So that I would look really carefully for that particular, marker and that milestone.
Excellent. And then a really pointed question, as we said, I have 17 oxycodone left, and for people like me, how long specifically do I have to make those last until we get this goddamn FDA approval done?
It's 17 divided by, it's going to be 5 to 10 years.
How tight am I cutting
You're
these?
tight. You're cutting these pretty tight, because unfortunately, based on the way the FDA works right now, it's going to be a while. It's going to be probably 5 years, I would guess. Now, there is a chance, potentially. I mean, there's already some chatter that based on a few of the larger trials undergoing right now, the FDA could provide approval without the traditional 2 phase 3 studies.
Yeah.
But we'll see, right? But it's going to be a while. It's not going to be multiple decades, but I think it's going to be at least 5 years.
Well, given, as you mentioned, the history in the culture and in science, this isn't a lung cancer treatment in which they've just invented the molecule.
Right.
It's never been introduced to human systems.
It's been around
never
for a
been
while.
exposed to human. This is, exposed to human biology. It's been around for a long time. So hopefully, for your sake, and the company and the investors
and for
the patients, obviously, the FDA sees some way to speed it up. So Greg, I want to thank you for coming in here. You are, by the way, for people listening who are also senior management or starting companies, like, listen to this again. Greg answers the questions. He's very articulate on the space. These are not phoned in answers. He's thinking about it, putting it in context, bringing in specific details, and then marrying them to the broader science and industries in. Like, that is real CEO work. I mean, I have guys come in.
Thank you, Oren.
No, thank you for doing it. I have guys come in here and just phone it in. They just given the pat answers that are in the PPM, or in the 10K, 8K, Super 8K filing. And, you don't need them on the podcast. That you could just read the filings.
The document.
Yeah. But I think you are, for me, and I just want to call this out for people who are listening, really dead of center for how you want to represent your company. The ability to get into the details. When a senior management can get into the details of the drug, of the industry, and then come back out and talk strategy and trends and context as well, it just gives so much comfort to the investor, to the customers, that somebody is really in charge of the deal, and you represent your company in that way. It's really refreshing.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. It's been great to spend a little bit of time with you today, and definitely worth the drive up to Carlsbad from La Jolla this afternoon.
Yeah, I love it when people say, yeah, it was definitely worth the drive. It was over 6 miles, and
right.
So it's a very, thank you.
Okay, it was like 30 miles or so.
Okay,
it wasn't that
fair.
far.
That's fair. Great to have you here, and I hope we get to have you again as this company develops. It's super exciting. Thank you.
Look forward to it. Yeah, great. Thanks.
Hey, thanks for listening, and be sure to stay tuned for more great content from Oren Klaff. If you want to get daily insights and additional assets, go to orenclaff.com/daily and sign up for a 7-day trial of the Daily Dealmaker. See you next time.